Hello, welcome to the Ugandan Watchman podcast, in which we are going to be discussing events that affect our lives today in the end time. And a podcast which, if you listen to, you'll know that we really are living in the times that will see the return of the Lord. Now, today I'm going to talk about a very unique subject that I've called the currency of the New World Order, or the currency of the Babylonian system. Now, for so many people who are been listening to the end time message, New World Order is not something familiar. However, I will define it as this. Now, Revelation chapter 13 prophesies about a one-world government that is coming, headed by the Antichrist, a one-world religious system that is coming, headed by the false prophet, not a false prophet, the false prophet, and a one-world economic system. Now, those things are already largely in place right now. Now, what I'm going to focus on today is actually the economic system, and I will tell you what is the currency of that new world order that is already in play right now, and people are using it to exchange and to buy things and sell things, only they do not know about it. Those three, the one world government, political system, one world political system, one world religious system, and the one world economic system, are summarized all together as Babylon. Now, Babylon, we know from the book of Revelation chapter 18, is going to collapse at some stage in a sudden time. The scripture says in 1 hour, the whole of Babylon is going to collapse. Now, while so many people have been looking out for which is the geographical location of Babylon, where is Babylon going to be located, and how is it going to be rebuilt, because we know it is going to be destroyed, and yet we know it was destroyed before. Is it going to be rebuilt? The reality is that it is not going to be rebuilt. The physical, geographical Babylonian Empire is not going to be rebuilt. And that is clear from the book of Isaiah, chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 19 and 20, this is what it says. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation, nor will the Arabian pitch tents there, nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there. So that's what the Bible says. The kingdom of Babylon, as it was in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, will never be rebuilt again from generation to generation. Now that's clear, never. And there have been attempts to rebuild the physical, geographical kingdom of Babylon, most notably by Saddam Hussein, who was trying to go and rebuild it. But somehow, at the time when he was thinking about that, he was attacked by America, and he became history. That you already know. So it is not going to be rebuilt. However, there is another kingdom of Babylon that is going to be destroyed at the end. Now, that is the one that we are going to be focusing on. And we are going to be reading from the book of Revelation chapter 18, scriptures that perhaps you have read and you know all about, but you're going to see in a different light after today. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her pride. Now, Babylon, the fornication spoken about here is spiritual fornication, which means false teaching or apostasy. That is fornication. Now, the Babylon that is spoken about here is the spiritual as well as the financial system that is going to come, which is going to engulf the whole world, and which currently is engulfing the whole world. Now, when you read further on in the same book of Revelation chapter 18, now read on from verse 9, and it says, the kings of the earth who committed fornication. Now that is the kind of fornication of this spiritual empire, or this spiritual empire that is deceiving people and leading them into an apostasy. Now, the kings of the earth who committed fornication and live luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of, take a note of this, merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls. Now that represents everything to do with currency, that was at the time, that would be the equivalent of dollars and pounds and everything to do with currency. Then it says fine linen, purple and silk and scarlet, that is everything to do with clothing, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of the most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble. And cinnamon, now this is spices, cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil, frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat. Now this goes into foodstuffs. So this covers just about every kind of merchandise you would think about today. Fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, that's weapons of war. And then finally it says, now this is what really caught my attention, finally it says, merchandise of bodies and souls of men. Now that's what really caught my attention, because bodies and souls of men, merchandise, men merchandise. So I thought we were past the era of slave trade. So a time is coming when men are going to be merchandise, and not just their bodies as it was before, now their souls as well. Remember, this is a spiritual empire. So as well as a financial, as well as a political. So it takes not just the bodies, but also the souls of the men. So now I asked myself, how does this generation that has been fed on the gospel of freedom and, freedom of what? Democracy and everything, that freedom of expression and things like that, how does it come down to a point where the people in that place become merchandise, where human beings become merchandise? Is it even possible? Now, some people say there's slave trafficking and slave trade at a minor level, but this is talking about an abundance of merchandise, of bodies and souls of men. So now that's what made me ask myself, how does it come? How do these people who have been taught about freedom and everything that comes with freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of what to choose and everything, how do they then turn into merchandise, bodies and souls of men? And it's not just there. Revelation 13 says slave and free, and it creates a scenario where there is a group of people who are high and elevated above everybody else. Then there's a group of people who are called slaves. And then there are those who are like slave owners, almost like it was in the days of slave trade, almost like nobles and serfs as it was. Now we know there's been talk that there is a plan by the New World Order to create a system of nobles and serfs and nobody in between, and erase the middle class. And sometimes it sounds ludicrous. How does it happen? Because, this generation has grown knowing there's a middle class that determines economies and, and all the purchases, and is a perfect market. However, we know that this is going to be eroded. Now, I'm going to show you how people who have grown up as free and in democratic nations can become merchandise, as the scripture says. I'm going to show it to you, and it is in the scripture. I recall how shocked I was when the Lord first revealed it to me, that not only is it going to happen, it is happening, and it is in the Bible. And there is nothing new under the sun. We know that. So it comes from a story that we are very familiar with. So I'm answering right now, how do people who have grown up on freedom become merchandise? The scripture says, as it is going to be in the end time. So the story of Joseph and how he was sold into slavery by his brothers, and how he turns out, he goes ahead of them, and we all know the story. We all know how he goes and interprets Pharaoh's dream. Now Joseph tells Pharaoh that there's going to be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Note that, 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And he tells Pharaoh that now this is how we are going to handle it. We are going to get a fifth of all the produce from all the land of Egypt through the years of the plenty. And then that will be as a reserve for the people in the years of famine. Now that sounds like a good idea, and it certainly was a good idea to Pharaoh and to his servants. And so Joseph is made a ruler. Now I want you to understand, let's read this scripture exactly as it says, because there is a lot in this thing of what Pharaoh says to Joseph. Now this is what Joseph says to Pharaoh. Now therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and let him set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5, 20% of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh. This, and the grain belongs to the people, it is stored up under the authority of Pharaoh. Okay? And then he said, and let them keep the food in the cities. In other words, there will be branches of stores in the cities. And then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. Now that's incredibly good advice. So when people are in plenty, no problem. Take 20%, not a worry. We have a lot, 7 years of plenty. So there's nothing to be worried about. We can afford to live off the 80% that we have left because we are in a time of plenty. But that's not how it plays out entirely. Now, at the end of the 7 years of plenty, then the famine begins to bite. Now, when the famine begins to bite, the people of Egypt run to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sends them to Joseph. And he tells Joseph, deal with them. Remember, Pharaoh had told Joseph, only in regard to the throne am I higher than you. In other words, you are the boss. Handle everything. Now, he is the banker. Now, the people come to Joseph to buy grain. Now remember, the only thing Joseph had that the people did not have is storage. The grain that he's giving them for money, he got from them for free. When they had plenty, they surrendered the grain freely. But now, when the famine bites, they come and they actually are buying the grain. Now, the only thing Joseph and Pharaoh had that the people did not have is storage. Now, another word for storage is called a bank. In today's terms, only thing they had is a bank. Now, everybody knows that banks don't actually have money, but they use the money of the people against the people. So now, here is how a whole generation of people turns from free men to slaves. And it's going to be right here in the scriptures. Generation of free men willingly turn themselves over to become slaves. Now, when his brothers come and he reveals himself to them, Joseph tells them one thing. He says, but now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years, the famine has been in the land, and there is still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And he says, and God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, to save your lives by a great deliverance. Now, that is the good news. But the good news is only for a select people. The rest of the people, it is not so good news, because after some time, in the course of time, there was no food in all the land, for the famine was distressingly severe. So the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan hung in doubt and wavered by reason of the hunger or the destitution or starvation of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt. Remember, he didn't have anything at the start of it. All he had was stores to store grain. Now, not only does he have grain, he has all the money of the people. So he says he gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, that is even the land where Jacob and his people came from, for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house, in other words, into the bank. Okay? And when the money was exhausted in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before your very eyes? For we have no money left. So now, here we are. At the time of 7 years of plenty, people are willingly giving up their grain and giving it to the banks, okay, to the storage. Now, it comes a time when they have no money left, but they still have to go straight back to the banks to get something to eat, now. Suddenly, the tables have been turned on them. Remember, Joseph didn't have any grain. He got it from the people. So Joseph said, give up your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for it, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for the horses, flocks, cattle of the herds, and the donkeys, and he supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock. Now remember, he has their money, he has their next factor of production. Now, this is a farming culture. So the next factor of production are animals and all these things. So now he has all those things. Now, but then that's just food for 1 year. Then there's the next year. They still need food. The 7 years are still going on. When that year was ended, they came to Joseph the second year and said to him, we will not hide from my Lord the fact that our money is spent. Now, my Lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our lands. So now, all we have is land and our bodies. Now, you see how he's progressively, in exchange for food. Why should we perish before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we and our land will be servants to Pharaoh, and give us seed to plant, that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field because of the overwhelming severity of the famine upon them. The land became Pharaoh's. Now all the factors of production belong to the government. Okay? The land belongs to the government, the animals and what belong to the government, everything belongs to the government of Pharaoh. Does that sound familiar? Just wait a bit. And as for the people, now listen to this, this is where the key thing is. And as for the people, he removed them to cities and practically made slaves of them at their own request. Now, 14 years earlier, they were free people. All it took 7 years of plenty. 7 years earlier, they were actually free people. But listen to what it says. As for the people, he removed them to the cities and practically made slaves of them at their own request, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other. That's interesting. In 7 years, people can turn from being free and being, people who exercise all manner of democratic rights to being slaves at their own request. How does that happen? By use of banks. How does that happen? By use of credit. Now, has this happened before? Yes, actually 7 years. Now, I'll give you an example of a country that has been made, the poster nation of this kind of transformation from once thriving economy and free people into people who actually are willingly giving themselves up to slavery. And that nation is the nation of Greece.